Baptist Church, glad that you're here. Number 65 in your hymn books, if you would, number 65. And why don't we stand together and we'll sing about our King and we'll worship him. We'll worship the King. Let's stand together, please.
Dear Lord, I thank you for this good day. Thank you for bringing us together so that we can worship you and just grow closer together and fellowship with one another. I pray that you would just open our hearts, that we would be attentive to what Pastor has to say, Lord, and that we would just learn more through the preaching of your word today, Lord. Just give us safety on our trip back home tonight, Lord, and good rest. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. May be seated. Take your Bibles, please. Go to the book of Genesis, chapter 16. I'm going to move this to be centered here. I appreciate our sound guys working with us. There we go. I appreciate Brother Lloyd Bauer and his work with our sound team and conducting the meeting on Sunday and getting the proper equipment for some of the ministry that we're trying to do in a spirit of excellence for the Lord. And I appreciate those guys. We do have just a couple of announcements. We do have on Saturday, there is the leaving for the 4:30 here at the church. We'll be leaving for the radio program, WVCY, Rally for Unshackled. And it starts at 6, and we've got about a 45-minute drive. We want to get there in a little bit of time, so about 4:30 that we'll have that. And so we'll be leaving here from the church. If you want to carpool with us, there's some that say, I want to go, but I'm going to drive my own car. That's no problem. But if you would like to carpool with us here, we'll either take the 15-passenger van or the bus, depending on how many people we have. But if you can sign up on that. We had a great time this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Olivia Kanzler had her dress rehearsal recital, and it went very well for violin. And if you can be a part of that, she's going to have the main recital Friday at 4 o'clock. So I just wanted to remind you about that. You could be praying for her, and you can be praying for Brother Josh Hill. He'll be preaching this Sunday afternoon in our 1 o'clock service for that. Okay. I remember when I was a teenager, there was one of the deacons in the church that allowed me to start mowing his lawn from the time I was about 12 years of age, and I could make a lawnmower go forward instead of going back on me. I did a push mower, and he had a particular way he liked his yard done. He liked me to use a grass catcher for his lawn. He lived in the city, and so he had a grass catcher. We'd catch the grass, and he had a particular spot in the backyard he liked for me to dump it. And this was before I knew how to work a weed eater, or we call it a whippersnipper in Canada. But before I learned how to work a weed eater, let me use hedge clippers on his sidewalk, not on the sidewalk, but on the grass. He wanted it about 1.5 inches, the grass about 1.5 inches away from the sidewalk and 1.5 to 2 inches deep. All along the sidewalk to his front door, all the way out to the road, all along the curb, down both sides of the driveway. He kept a very nice lawn. And he had a particular way he liked to supervise me doing it. And I have a lot of stories from mowing the lawn for this brother. He was very patient. And then he let me mow his neighbor's lawn, and then his sister's lawn, and then a friend of hers. And so my lawn mowing business kind of grew, all under the supervision of this brother from the church. Godly man. He was a great mentor for me and helped instill a good work ethic. I remember one particular Sunday, we had a special service. We called it a homecoming service. It was kind of a special service where we would send out a letter to the former church members and former pastors that we were going to have a special Sunday and then have dinner on the grounds because we had an evening service. And we put up a tent out that year because we had a lot of people we were expecting. And we were going to eat outside, across the parking lot, over by the swings in the garage shed where we kept the lawnmowers. And we had a beautiful, several acres in the backyard, several pecan trees or pecan trees, depending on which part of Georgia you were from. And just huge trees. There were about 4 or 5 of them, just all along the side of the railroad tracks of the property there. And we set up tables in the tent, and after the service, some of my teenage friends and I, we would run reconnaissance from the kitchen downstairs in the basement, up the steps, across the parking lot, behind the shed, over to where the tent was and the main buffet line. Then we go back and get some more food, some of the desserts, back and forth, back and forth. People that started going through the lines and eating, and they started sitting in their different areas under the tent and off to the side, and some of the kids on the ground over by the swing set. And finally, we made our plates. Everybody had gone through. I was exhausted, and I went over, and I sat out with my friends under the tent. I had just finished eating. I had gotten a seconds on Coke because I was a teenager. I liked pop. And I just was catching my breath, and here comes the brother who is the deacon in our church across the lawn over to the tent where my teenage friends and I are sitting. And I could tell he was upset about something. And he made a comment. He said, "Do we have to pay you guys to help around here? It's time to clean up, and you guys are just sitting around talking." And I thought, oh, I didn't realize while we were getting all of the food and all the desserts and extra chairs, everybody else was eating. By the time we sat down, everybody was done. But brother was hot. He was not happy. He was red under the collar, and he was fussing at us for why did we have to pay you to help around the church? And I was very hurt. This was an example, early example as a teenager of hurt feelings and conflict. I was embarrassed. I was in the pastor's son in the middle of my teenage friends. We've been working hard nonstop, only sat down a few minutes, scarfing down our food because we were raving hungry, teenage boys. But then we got fussed at by this brother deacon. And I was very hurt. Homecoming afternoon, we have an afternoon service, much like we have here, but we only did it once a year. And I remember just going to my dad, and I don't remember if I went to dad or my mom, and I just said, Brother McSwain, he just lit into me. And I explained what had happened, and we weren't sitting around the whole morning. We had just had our meal, just sat down. And my dad said, you're going to have to go to him. You're going to have to talk to him and share your hurt. And I'll never forget, as a teenage boy, this guy's been my boss. He's a deacon in the church. He's leadership. And he totally misunderstood the situation. And I remember I was sweating bullets when I went up to Brother McSwain after that service that afternoon. And I said, Brother McSwain, I said, could I speak to you for just a minute? Could we step into the office here? I remember with my dad. My dad's office was right there by the exit door to the parking lot. And we left the door open, but we stepped in, and I remember as a teenage boy, just as embarrassed as I could be and all flustered, and I was hurt. And I looking down at that desk, I couldn't look him in the eyes because I disappointed him, and he was upset, and he was cool by now. But I said, Brother McSwain, I said, look, I'm sorry for the way that I upset you. I said, but can I just explain what happened? And I explained to him about helping with bringing food out and set up chairs and going and getting the desserts, and then they needed more cups and plates. And I said, Brother McSwain, we had been working all afternoon, and he was very kind. He was very gracious. But that tense moment, I don't know if you've ever had circumstances like that when you have had conflict with somebody, maybe that you had trusted or cared about, and there was hurt feelings, there was somebody that got hot, somebody flew off the handle, maybe it was you, but somebody at you or somebody that you love, and now there's hurt there. Genesis chapter 16, God is going to reveal one of his names in a very intense conflict in Abram's family. Genesis chapter 12, God revealed to Abraham that he was going to have, with his wife, that he was going to have a seed. And it was going to be a great family, and he was going to give him all of the land that he could see, as far as the east, west, north, and south, in the land of Canaan. One day was going to be his and his family. He was going to give him a seed. He was going to bless him and give him that land. And he was going to give him a son. Chapter 15. God confirms it with a covenant. God, is it going to be my steward? My wife still can't have any babies. Did you want to just adopt my steward? Because culture of the day allowed you to adopt a slave or a steward as a son. He was considered an heir from then on. Abraham said, well, maybe wife's getting a little old. I'm a little old. Maybe this is how God's going to do it. God said, no, it's going to be from your wife. It's going to be from you. He cut a covenant with Abraham in chapter 15, and he believed God. It was counted to him for righteousness. Chapter 16, we're going to have a crisis time, and I want us to look at the names for God. I think I had that emailed. Did you guys have that there? Okay, good. There we go. The names of God. The name we're looking at tonight is El Roi, El Roi, the God who sees. And it's born out of the time of conflict, the consequences in Abram's sin. Look at Genesis chapter 16, verse number 1. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, bare him no children. And she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. It's interesting here with Abraham and the guise of conflict and relationships, the consequences of Abram's sin. Abram, during the time of famine, remember he went down to Pharaoh and he went down to Egypt, and that whole story of, well, my wife's real beautiful. I'm afraid that, somebody's going to kill me and try and marry her, and because she's so pretty, and I'll just say she's my sister. And you remember the Pharaoh took his wife into his household, and God started giving them all kinds of problems. You remember that? Abram went down to Egypt. A lot of Bible scholars feel like it wasn't in faith that he went down. It was in fear and frustration. And he comes back with an Egyptian slave girl for his wife, a handmaid for his wife. He comes up with lots of goods, lots of blessing from Pharaoh out of fear. Here, take all these goods. I want your God to be appeased. Please go away. But, we all have baggage in our relationships that we bring. We have a sin nature. And though the Spirit of God is forming Christ in us as believers, we all have difficulties in relationships and conflict, and we all have baggage. Some that we have that are from our family, maybe a difficult family life that we grew up with parents that had struggles. Maybe you experienced some struggles in your life, maybe bad experiences as a child, maybe bad experiences as a teenager, maybe physical difficulties. Maybe it wasn't necessarily family problems, maybe it was physical problems. Maybe there were other things, bad choices in your life or bad choices from other people's lives. Abram brings back some, you could say there's going to be some consequences that are going to come from the connection from this Egyptian maid. Hagar, it means stranger. It means sojourner. We understand that eventually the Bible and the New Testament is going to regulate how you treat your slaves. And then in the New Testament, you're to treat them as brothers. So eventually, everywhere Christianity goes, slavery disappears. But in the culture of their day, Abram comes back, and I believe there's some consequences. And you're going to have in verse number 2, counsel from self. First, you have Abraham's sin. He took the family to Egypt. And now you have counsel from self. Sarah is going to try and come up with an idea at how to have a baby under her house in her name. Verse number 2 of chapter 16 says, and Sarah said unto Abram, behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing, I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. This is a really bad idea. It's acceptable in the culture of the day to marry one of your handmaids or your slaves, to have a concubine, or to have another wife that would be considered your seed, one of your heirs. The first wife still being considered, you could say, the woman of the house, and then the secondary wife or the concubines would kind of be secondary and third level wives. So there kind of would be a tier system. It's always a bad idea because God's program was one man and one woman for one lifetime. And anytime that's violated, there's always consequences and problems. And by the way, this bad idea about my wife's not having a baby or I'm not having a baby, maybe if you take my maid, can you think of another one of the sons or grandsons that starts coming up with that idea? Jacob takes Abram's idea and he starts doing that with his family, and that was part of the consequences. But this was Sarah's idea. Sometimes when we're in conflict, we just want the problem to go away. Sometimes in difficulties of life, the burdens that we carry, we would just like for God just to remove it, just take this problem out of our life. There's kind of this fight and flight type of reflex in our flesh to remove ourselves from the suffering. And Sarah comes up with a shortcut. It's been 11 years and there's still no child from her. But sometimes people, godly people, good people, Sarah is in the hall of faith, okay? Hebrews chapter 11. 1 Peter chapter 3, she's looked up to as a submissive wife that followed her husband, tenting all over the deserts and the wilderness and the land of Canaan, all the way down to Egypt and back, as an example of a godly, submissive woman who feared the Lord. But sometimes we as godly people who really want to do right, we give ourselves bad counsel. Proverbs is going to say 3 times, in the multitude of counsel there's safety. It is important to include godly people in your life. I remember I had a man in the church years ago who came to me and he had talked about how that he was going to withdraw from the ministries that he was in. And he wasn't tired, he wasn't exhausted, he just wanted to back out of the ministry. He didn't want to let his name stand for these particular things. And I said, well, have you prayed about that? He said, well, yeah, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I said, have you gone to any counselors about it? No, I've been praying about it for weeks. And in my mind, it seemed as his pastor and his mentor, he was just discipling him. He had just started getting involved in ministry, and now I think feelings were hurt. He was kind of pulling out of some ministry opportunities. He said, no, I've just been thinking about it a lot. It's good to have counsel because sometimes Paul said, even about himself, in my flesh dwelleth no good thing. So there are times when Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, in dealing with spiritual depression, its causes and cures, he talks about the need for you to preach to yourself, not always listen to yourself. The Psalms talk a lot about that. He takes his feelings, but he takes theological, biblical truth, and he preaches that truth to himself because part of him, the flesh, is pulling him in a wrong direction. And sometimes when you get in stress and conflict and suffering in life, we come up with the best idea we've got. By the way, several times in Jesus' life, the Pharisees and Sadducees are going to come up with two options for Jesus. You remember the debate about the divorce thing? Is it divorce for any reason or if she's committed adultery? There's going to be a time about resurrection. Oh, here's this lady. She had 5 husbands that dies. What happens if she dies? They give Jesus two options. Okay, she gets to heaven. None of them are her husband. Or the first guy was her husband, and they give Jesus two options. You notice something? Quite often, Jesus will pick the third door. The two options, they didn't give him the third option because they had two bad ideas. And I think we have to be careful because Jesus would correct that in the Gospel of John by saying, verily, verily, I say unto you. Anytime is a double verily. He's not only teaching truth, he's correcting bad ideas in the audience. So many times we're thinking so hard about this option, and we've really come up with these two hard ideas, and we've got these two answers we think. But it's good to have counsel because sometimes, even though we mean well, God has a third door, and the multitude of counsel they're saved. Sarah comes up with this really bad idea, okay? Maybe you should marry one of the slave girls. She's my slave girl. Culturally, it's acceptable. You can have a second wife. She kind of can stay as the concubine. I think this is what God really meant us to do. Well, that was Abraham's sin, and this is Sarah's sin, and now Abram's going to sin again. This is a really bad idea. Verse number 2, it says, and Sarah said unto Abram, behold now, the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. Well, now Abraham's going to sin, and he's going to take the bad advice. Now, hold on just a minute, married guys. Okay? This is an abnormal marriage illustration, okay? If you've got a godly Christian wife, she should be one of your counselors. It's not good for man to be alone. God has brought you a wife. She's going to know you more than anybody else on the planet. And so she's going to be a great counselor and advisor. But this was one of the times it was not good. And Abraham should have prayed about it, talked to the Lord, maybe sought some counsel from Eliezer, his godly servant. No, he's going to take the advice. Do you remember the book of Proverbs? There's a little children's song that goes with it. Proverbs chapter 1, verse number 10. My son, if sinners entice thee. You remember the kid song? Consent thou not, consent thou not. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. How many ever heard that song before? You hear that? Okay, look at all those godly people. Yeah, I heard that song as a kid, and my parents made me memorize that verse, and they talked to me about my friends. It's good to get counsel from Scripture. It's good to get counsel from saints. It's good to get counsel in supplication when you pray about it. It's good to have those three, that a three-stranded rope is stronger than one. Abraham should have got counsel. He should have done it. But he consented to bad counsel, and he wound up doing it. That's such a sad thing, that he hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And then it's going to cause a bunch of confusion. Look at verse number 3. And Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian. after Abraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. So this is going to cause a lot of confusion. Can I just encourage you, culture does not define right and wrong. Culture does not get to define biblical marriage. You may have feelings, or people may have feelings that are counter to biblical marriage. There's all kinds of horrible dating sites on the internet and counseling centers where they actually will encourage couples that are having marital problems to have an affair to help their relationship. Society, culture doesn't define right and wrong, God's word does. And there will be unfaithful feelings. There will be temptations. There will be, based on experiences and influence, desires that are going to crop up that are outside of God's program. And the Bible should define the person that is solid. Psalm chapter 1 is the one that's like a tree planted by the rivers of water, is the one who meditates day and night and does not sit in the seat of the scornful, nor stand or sit in the counsel of the ungodly. Abram should have known better. But culturally, this is good. It's acceptable. It's fine. Unfortunately, verse number 4, and he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. Sin is going to get so complicated. You ever heard that phrase, that old poem? Oh, what tangled webs we weave when we practice to deceive. Wow. We think we come up with a really good ideas at how to get God to hurry up and get us out from underneath this burden or this frustrating circumstance, but this is not the way to do it. I remember my wife and I were in seminary, and I was in Kansas City, and we were working in the inner city program, and I remember the inner city director that we were working with. I worked construction with him and his family, and then he was in seminary classes with me. Him and his brothers and his dad had a construction business in the Kansas City area, way out in the country, and he was in charge of the inner city program, and he said, look, I got this guy. He said, he wants to start bringing his kids. He's on like his second marriage, and he's got like 3 or 4 different kids with 3 or 4 different moms. And he said, but he's gotten right with the Lord. He wants to start coming to church and bringing his kids. I've gotten permission from the church to use the 15-passenger that's just sitting over here. We had buses that were being used. Would you be willing to pick them up for church on Sunday morning? I said, yeah, it's working out the way it is right now. I could drive it. I don't have a problem. So my wife and I went, and I'll never forget, we went in one morning, and he had kind of slept in, and we went in, and we were invited in. He said, you can come in. And as we went inside the house, there were people sleeping in different rooms. You could tell there'd been a party the night before. There was food and beer bottles everywhere. Kids, you could tell, were just waking up. They're kind of getting out of their pajamas into their clothes. There was old, hard, you know how your bread, when it gets hard, you leave it out on the counter? Hard bread on the counter, and the kids were taking, that's back when they came out with green ketchup. I don't know whose idea that was. But they were putting green ketchup on this old, crusty, hard bread that had been sitting out for days. And I remember going to the next room, stepping over people, trying to find socks under plates and piles. And I think that's about the same size. We won't even go for clean. I think it doesn't even have to match. We got to get on the road. And I remember thinking and looking at each life that had been impacted, consequences of someone that had gotten away from the Lord and just kept walking down that road and was trying to come back. But to come back, there was going to be some work and some consequences that they were going to have to learn to face. There's a lot of confusion. But here we have in verse number 4, it says, and he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. This is Hagar's feelings about her mistress. So this is wife number 2, always a bad sign. This is wife number 2's feelings about wife number 1. Can you think of another example of a loved wife that couldn't have children, and there was a second wife that just had kids, and they went up to the temple every year, and she would pray for a baby boy. You remember? Hannah. I'm going to do a sermon at some point about Shiloh. In the South, we pronounced it Shiloh. In Hebrew, they kept correcting me. Shiloh. We went to Shiloh, where the tabernacle was for 300 years. They've excavated, they believe they found the valley and the ridge line around where the children of Israel could camp all around it, look down into the plateau, and see in this flat section. They have excavated archaeologically. They believe that's where the Ark of the Covenant was and the tabernacle during Eli's day. Hannah was there. They've got a big plaque up on the wall. We got pictures of all the moms there in front of it. There's going to be, in this case, a lady now, a mom, a wife that can start having children. She's insecure already. She's a slave girl. Now she's one of the wives, and now she has the heir. And she gets it's her turn now to be the queen mom. She's got the kid. She's got the baby. She's the one that's being tended now. They're looking after her and her boy. And she pride. So when you have been hurt, I remember in counseling class they used to say, bitterness is harbored hurt. And hurting people hurt people. That's exactly what happens with Hagar. She's been jerked around as a slave girl, taken away from her home country and all her family. She's made to work hard for this Sarah. And now she's the boss. She's going to get hers. And there's this bitterness that creeps in. And hurting people hurt people. And she does. Now she feels in charge. And it's very sad when we don't turn to the Lord. You remember Proverbs 13:10. Only by pride cometh contention. Only by pride cometh contention. When we're having a hard time getting along with somebody, there's pride that so easily crops up. Maybe you're only 20% to blame. But, see, that's where Job went wrong. Do you remember he started arguing percentages with God? Was it true that he had not earned his suffering? That is true. But what he little over-argued his innocence. I haven't even done this. I haven't even done that. I haven't even. From chapter 1, where he's willing to make a sacrifice in the morning just in case they blow it, to now being falsely accused, he's overdoing his argument about how righteous he's been. Partially right. Job was 90% right. But friends, by the end of the book, God shows up, opens his resume, and Job says, yep, should have kept my mouth shut. You're great, God. There's only one righteous. I place my hand over my mouth. See, anytime there's conflict, pride is going to come up in your heart, even if you're only 10% wrong. Even if you're only 3% wrong, your first reflex is to be defensive, and pride's going to come in. That's what's going to happen with Hagar. Had she been wronged? Yes, without a doubt. But now she's going to be the one that's hurting other people. And you're going to have the guilt and the conflict of relationships. Let me see if I can, the guilt of conflict in relationships. There's going to be shifting reproach and shifting blame. Look at verse number 5. We're good at this as humans. And Sarai said unto Abram, my wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid unto thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. And the Lord's judge between me and thee. Will you be the spiritual leader and fix this? Oh, now she wants him to be the spiritual leader and do the right thing. She shifted blame, Sarah's pride, hurt feelings, injuries, and emotions. It's interesting how she's going to try and be respectful and still be spiritual. How that she says in verse number 5, my wrong be upon thee, I have... he says, I despise thee in thine eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. God knows who's right. Oh, this is a danger. And then you're going to have the shucking of responsibility in verse number 6. What does Abram do? But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy handmaid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. You know, when our kids used to have a fight, and they would come in mad because so-and-so, hit me with a hockey stick, and so pushed me after he scored, and so punched me in the stomach, so-and-so called me a name. We begin to realize having them do a I'm sorry at that moment when they're hot. We had one that was a lawyer. He was never wrong. He gave 27 reasons why he deserved to hit the other person. And then we had one who just like, well, they deserted, they had it coming, and I'll do it again. So, okay. You can make them say they're sorry, but that's probably not the best time. Ask them to forgive you about it. It probably wasn't the best time for Abram to hand the counseling ministry to his wife at that moment in her life. She probably needed some encouragement and some cool-off time, some devotional atmosphere herself. She had been hurt. So you got two hurting people, and then now he shucks the responsibility and tries to give it over. And Abram's pride is going to come on the scene. And then you're going to have this strifeful reaction in verse number 6 at the end. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. I don't know what Sarah did, but it wasn't nice. And the message was clear. You don't even want to wake up another day in this house. It caused her enough to run away from home. I don't know did she go in with a stick and work her over? Did she just go in with her tongue? You remember the Proverbs 31 woman? In her tongue is the law of what? Kindness. Well, she left that one at home that morning. She left Sarah's tent. Remember Isaac? She's got her own tent. She's going to leave Sarah's tent, and she's going to go over to Hagar's tent and give her what for? Probably bring up her past. Probably remind her of where she came from and how she blew it, and she's just a little slave girl and lit into her. It doesn't tell us. Because in this moment, you just need to understand whatever happened, it was bad enough that this woman realizes, I'm either not going to live or she's going to make it miserable for me. Now, I don't believe that Sarah was of the testimony and character that she was going to kill her, but I think she lit into her, for sure verbally, maybe even giving her a little as she's packing her bags. Or after the blow up, she packs her bags quietly and she's gone. God is going to enter the scene here. It's very interesting. The God of conflict and relationships. You're going to have a confrontation from the Lord in verse number 7 and 8. Look what the Bible says. I had some quotes from Spurgeon, but we're going to move on. He's going to bring up, it says, and the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way of Shur. So you're going to have Abram in the land of Canaan. She's at the, you could say, first truck stop out of town on the way back to or camel stop. And God, it says the angel of the Lord, you're going to have instances of this angel of the Lord in Scripture. A lot of Bible scholars believe this was a messenger of the Lord, possibly second person of the Trinity. You call it a pre-incarnate appearance of the Son of God. He doesn't have human flesh like at his conception and birth, but he's going to appear as a messenger because he's going to speak in the first person as if he's God. So whether it's a messenger angel and God speaking in his ear and he's got a little Bluetooth right there, okay, God says, or it seems to be this is God speaking. Either way, the message is from God. Verse number 8, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence comest thou? And whither wilt thou go? It's interesting, God uses questions. They encourage Christians reaching out to other hurting people. Questions soften the conscience. Accusations harden the will. Questions soften the conscience. How you doing? I'm concerned. I wanted to ask, is it true? Well, I heard it, you said. Well, so-and-so told me. See the difference? Questions soft the conscience. Accusations harden the will. I knew you were going to do that. So-and-so. Don't go like this. You come in like that. And that's the way God comes in. Do you remember Cain? He comes in asking, doest thou well to be angry, Cain? Adam, where art thou? Peter, lovest thou me more than these? So there's this interaction. He's such a good counselor. That's why he's a wonderful counselor, Isaiah 9. He's so good at it. I remember when I was in Bible college, my third year, I was going through a very difficult time in my life. There's 70 in the class. Everybody filed out. The bell rang. Everybody was going. I was in the last class of the day. I went to the corner of the class, back by the stairwell. Somebody had turned the lights out. And I just fell against the wall and slid down. And I said, God, I need you to be my wonderful counselor right now. I don't know what to do. And I just threw myself on the Lord. That's where Hagar is. In this moment in her life, God is asking her questions, trying to pry the conscience. It's interesting, the questions that he asked. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence comest thou? Where'd you come from? Where have you been? Where are you coming from? What's going on in your life? He wants her to be honest. Do you remember when he healed the lame man by the pool? Jesus did. And he said, what do you want? What do you want? He wanted him to say it. I want to be healed. And to say it out loud. Do you remember when the woman with the issue of blood touched Jesus' hem of his garment? He turned around. He said, who touched me? Do you remember when Jacob is wrestling with God, the angel of the Lord? Later, you remember that? He's going to say, what is your name? Admit it. You're a deceiver. You're Jacob. I want you to say it out loud. He's going to say, where you been? Hagar. You're a stranger here, aren't you? And he reminds her of where she's at in God's plan for her life, even though it's hard. He calls her handmaid of Sarah. He's about to tell her to go back, but he's reminding her where his providence has taken her, and it's a tough spot. It's difficult. She's out of her league right now with ideas at how to make this work. She says the only way is to get it over with and to end it. I'm going to leave town. But God is pricking her conscience. He's reminding her, though, of her duties and her responsibilities and her pledges, her privileges and blessings that she has. He said, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go? He says, where are you going to go? Well, she's going back to Egypt, because if you take the map of where Abraham was and going down to this shore by the well there, it's on the way back to Egypt. This is a picture here. God is going to give some counsel in verse number 9. He says, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. There's a couple of things that are very interesting about this counsel from the Lord. God says you're going to have a humble attitude. You're going to have a humble attitude about this conflict. He wanted her to go back. There's a marriage counseling book. I picked it up off my shelf this afternoon. I just read some pages out of it just to remind me. I use it for premarital counseling. It's called When Sinners Say I Do. Have you ever heard of that? That's a great, fantastic book for marriage, whether you're thinking about marriage, premarital counseling, or you've already been married and you're married. When Sinners Say I Do. There's another counseling book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone, but it's called Sacred Marriage, and the whole premise of the book is God has allowed you to marry off to another sinner to show you how much you need him. God puts everybody in your life in his providence to make you more like Christ, especially the people you're closest to. People in your church, people in your family, the spouse, that teacher, those students, that neighbor, that boss, those workers. God has put everyone into your life, and if you're a believer, it's to make you like Christ. And Hagar is at a place in her life where she would just like stamp a label on Sarah's forehead. Toxic. And society of our day says you have every right to be happy, and anybody that is getting in the way of your happiness is toxic. And so you should abandon and flee, write that person off, cancel them out of your life, and you get out of that relationship. Only be around people that make you feel good. And God is going to say, Hagar, you go right back in that relationship. I'm not done with you, but it's going to be hard. You're going to have to humble yourself. And that's the second thing that he mentions in his counsel that's very interesting. You're going to have humble actions. You're going to have to submit. You're going to have to serve. Go right back into that job. I don't want you to quit yet. Now, sometimes God does lead you to move on, but in this case, God did not. He was clearly having her go back and submit. This is going to be a very difficult thing, but I'm so thankful for this next thing, from the counsel from the Lord to the comfort from the Lord. Verse number 10 says, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. This is an amazing promise. God is going to multiply her. He's just told her a very similar promise. Not the same, but very similar to what Abraham was promised. God's given her a promise, and she's going to have to trust the Lord. I like what one pastor made the comment about dealing with difficult circumstances. He said, God has allowed hard things in your life so that you can show the world that your God is great, that knowing him brings peace, joy, even when life is hard. The point of your life is to point other people and you to him. Frankly, you need to get over yourself. Sometimes we just need to have it straight, don't we? And that's what God says. Hagar, just go back. I want you to submit. But I'm going to bless you. You're going to have to cling and trust God's promises. You're going to have to trust God's prophecy. Verse 11 and 12, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, thou shalt bear a son. Thou shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East right now. A lot of these prophecies still carrying on. Our job is to pray for the gospel to go forward in Isaac's family and Ishmael's family. That's the heartbeat here. God is comforting her, teaching her to trust his promises, to trust the prophecy, and trust the person of God. But here's where the name of God comes in, these last verses. The God of compassion and relationship. He is the God who hears. It's interesting, verse number 11 says, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, behold, thou art with child, thou shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. God says, I heard you in that tent when you were packing your bags. I heard Sarah when she lit into you. I saw her hit you. I saw everything that happened to you. And I heard when you were saying in your heart, that's not fair, that hurts. That's unkind. This isn't right. That's not just. This shouldn't happen. Affliction is a strong terminology, and God says, I heard, and then he's the God who sees. Verse number 13, and she called the name of the Lord, that's Jehovah, that spake unto her, thou God seest me. And if you had a Hebrew Bible, you would see she called Jehovah El Roi. Now, in chapter 15, God is going to tell Abraham his name. In this moment, this woman sees the compassion of God, hears that he has been listening to her affliction, and says, your nickname is going to be the seeing God. She didn't get away with that. You saw the whole thing, didn't you? I'm not alone. You've seen me the whole time. This, thou God seest me. It's not just like, you've heard of stories of people getting mugged in Chicago down at the bus stop and in the subway station, and people just kind of video it and then get on their bus and leave. Then nobody goes to help. You're like, like at the end of the video, the person's laying there unconscious on the ground, and you're like, why are 6 people videoing? Somebody stop it. See, some people, your neighbor can see you go through affliction and not do anything. That's not the word here for God sees me. It's the idea of he's watching and has compassion. He is actively involved and sees you in your affliction. That's the kind of God that we have. And then it's very interesting, this perspective here. We have a God who lives and sees, because verse number 14, wherefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. She gets the name the truck stop. She gets the name the well. And it's this really big name, and all you need to know and understand that it is basically saying that it is the God who sees and hears, and he's alive. This isn't just a stick God that some kid whittled and then we put it up in a tent and we put gold coins and food in front of it, but it never does anything in my life. This is the living God who met me at this truck stop, at this camel stop, at this well. By the way, you remember another woman in distress by a well in John chapter 4. Jesus says, we must needs go through Samaria. I got a truck stop. I got a divine appointment. There's a hurting woman. She's been hurt in her marriage. Hello. Jesus, who had seen her. I know you've got 5 husbands. The one you have is not your. Jesus saw her. Do you see? Jesus is El Roi. He stopped by a truck, stopped by a well, and God showed up again in the person of Jesus Christ. God sees you, friend. You're going to have to trust him even when it hurts. The Lord wants you to be nice, even though they're nasty. But you're going to have to understand and cling to a real God that hears you and sees you, and he's alive in your life. And that's sometimes all you've got to cling to. And stay away from your first reflexes and your bad ideas of your flesh and your sometimes even your family and other people that just take your offense for them. Now you're offended and they're offended, and then your mom's offended and your aunt's offended, and your cousin's offended, your wife's offended, your kids are all offended. You got all these people that are mad and on your side now, but nobody's looking to God. And this is this only time this name for God shows up. I was going to skip it and go to Jehovah, but I'm like, man, this is good. This is us. Can I share with you that deacon in that church, Brother McSwain, he was such a sweet, godly man. And that one time that I saw that he got upset. But I went to him and I gave him that hug, and he hugged me like a grandpa. And the Lord let me make it right. But conflict is tough. We've got to learn to see God in our life. Let's pray. Father, thank you for our time together. I pray that you would help us be able to see your hand at conflict in our life and the difficult circumstances, that you are God who sees and is alive and you hear. Thank you for being El